Hello and welcome to What is History, where we talk about places and events from our past that helped shape today's world as we know it. The subject of today's episode, to me personally, is one of the most intriguing and bizarre subjects I've ever came across. Throughout the episode, we're going to discuss the lengths in which human beings are willing to go and the unspeakable atrocities that they are willing to commit against each other to secure power, influence, money, and even sometimes love. But we're not just going to tell the story about any human beings. We're going to tell the story from the perspective of three women: Marie de Brinvilliers, better known as the Marquise de Brinvilliers, Catherine Deshayes, known as La Voisin, and Frances Mossiker de Montespan, also known as the Marquise de Montespan. And for simplicity, we're just gonna call them for the rest of the episode Marie, Catherine, and Francoise. Those women played pivotal roles in what later came to be known as quote-unquote the Affair of the Poisons. In the 17th century, no monarch wielded as much power as King Louis XIV of France. From his palace of Versailles, the quote-unquote Sun King ruled over the wealthiest country in Europe, surrounded by a court of nobles, anxious to win his favor and in many cases his affections. As French historian Lynn Mollenauer puts it, quote, "What you have in the court of Louis XIV is a lot of people jockeying for power, position, and the ear of the king," unquote. For noble women who had no real political power, one of the best ways to gain influence and financial security was in the king's bedroom. This was also a time when boundaries between science and superstition were blurred. While the Age of Enlightenment was dawning, many in France still held deep-seated beliefs in astrology, alchemy, and the occult. The nobility in particular sought out fortune-tellers and alchemists to gain an edge in the ruthless competition for the king's favor, because when so much money and power is concentrated within one man and his royal court, people will do anything to gain an advantage or neutralize a rival, including dabbling in the dark arts. Paris in the 17th century was allegedly swarming with sorceresses, magicians, and renegade priests who performed orgiastic quote-unquote black masses and peddled love potions and odorless poisons. In this opulent world, power was the ultimate prize. For Marie, the Marquise de Brinvilliers, the thirst for power and control became an obsession, one that would ultimately lead her to commit unspeakable crimes. Marie was born into the elite circles of French society, the daughter of Antoine de Bray, a powerful magistrate and a man of considerable influence. From an early age, Marie was accustomed to the privileges and responsibilities that came with her status, but as she grew older, she found herself trapped in a life that was far from the fairy tale that she had been promised. In 1651, at the tender age of 17, Marie was married off to Antoine Gobelin, Marquis de Brinvilliers, a union that was more a transaction between powerful families than a marriage of love. The Marquis de Brinvilliers was a man of contradictions. While he held a title of nobility, his character was anything but noble. He was a gambler, a libertine, and a man of weak moral fiber. Marie, who was intelligent, attractive, and ambitious, quickly realized that her husband was more interested in the pleasures of gambling and debauchery rather than the responsibilities of marriage. Isolated and neglected, Marie found herself alone in a world that valued her only as a means to an end. It was during this time of loneliness and despair that Marie met Gaudin de Sainte-Croix, a young and charismatic officer who served in the same regiment as her husband. Sainte-Croix was everything the Marquis was not: charming, attentive, and ambitious. It wasn't long before Marie and Sainte-Croix began an affair, one that would lead them down a path of darkness from which there was no return. Sainte-Croix was no ordinary lover. He was a man with connections to the shadowy world of alchemy and poison. During a brief imprisonment in the Bastille, Sainte-Croix had become acquainted with Exley, an infamous Italian prisoner who had served in royal courts across Europe. From Exley, Sainte-Croix learned the secrets of undetectable poisons, knowledge that he would soon put to deadly use. Under Sainte-Croix's guidance, Marie began experimenting with poisons, using her own servants as guinea pigs. These deadly concoctions were designed to kill without leaving a trace, and soon Marie became adept at their use. But for Marie, the ultimate goal was not merely the thrill of murder, it was the desire to seize control of her family's fortune. Her father, Antoine, was a powerful man, but he had plans that did not align with Marie's ambitions. He intended to pass on the family wealth to his sons, leaving Marie with little more than the crumbs of inheritance. Marie, with the encouragement of Sainte-Croix, decided to take matters into her own hands. In 1666, she poisoned her father using a dose of the lethal mixture she had perfected. The death was swift and no one suspected foul play. Emboldened by her success, Marie turned her attention to her two brothers, who were next in line to inherit the family fortune. In 1670, both brothers died under mysterious circumstances, their deaths attributed to quote-unquote malignant humor. Once again, no one suspected the beautiful Marie. Marie's life of crime might have continued indefinitely if not for a twist of fate. In 1672, Saint Croix died suddenly, likely the victim of one of his own experiments. After his death, a casket was found among his belongings, containing letters that exposed Marie's crimes in detail. Realizing that the net was closing in on her, Marie fled to London and later to the Netherlands. But her past eventually caught up with her, and in 1675 she was captured in a convent in the Belgian town of Liège and brought back to France to stand trial. The trial of Marie was nothing short of sensational. The public was captivated by the idea that a noblewoman, someone of Marie's stature, could be capable of such heinous acts. Denied legal counsel, Marie stood alone against the mountain of evidence. She attempted to shift the blame onto Saint Croix, claiming that he had manipulated her, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. The judges found her guilty and sentenced her to a public penance in which she was forced to confess her sins before being executed. The judgment said, quote, "She is condemned the public penance before the principal door of the Cathedral Church of Paris, where she will be taken in a tumbrel with naked feet, a rope around her neck, and holding in her hands a lighted torch weighing 2 pounds. There, being on her knees, she will declare that wickedly and from motives of vengeance, and in order to possess their property, she had poisoned her father and her 2 brothers, and attempted the life of her sister. From thence she will be conducted to the Place de Grève to have her head cut off upon the scaffold. Her body will then be burnt and the ashes thrown to the wind. Before execution, she will be applied to the quote-unquote question, ordinary and extraordinary, in order to compel her to reveal the names of her accomplices. Any goods she may have inherited through the deaths of her father, her brothers, and her sister will be taken from her and all property confiscated. As we heard, the court did not stop at a simple execution. Before her death, Marie was subjected to the brutal quote-unquote water torture, a method designed to break even the strongest will. Bound to a stool, she was forced to swallow 2.4 gallons, around 9 liters of water, until her stomach was distended to the point of bursting. It was only then, on the brink of death, that she said, quote, "Out of so many guilty people, must I be the only one to be put to death? And yet half the people in town are involved in this sort of thing, and I could ruin them if I were to talk." Those final words uttered by Marie were the first layer in uncovering the quote-unquote affair of the poisons throughout the entire French society. And indeed, the first layer was poison, because what came after that was much uglier and uglier. On July 16, 1676, Marie was publicly beheaded and her body was burned. Her execution was intended as a warning to others, but it was also the catalyst for the broader investigation that started into the affair of the poisons. While Marie's story was one of personal vendetta, the tale of Catherine, known as La Voisin, reveals a more sinister and widespread corruption. Catherine's rise from poverty to power is a testament to her cunning and ruthlessness, as well as her deep understanding of the dark desires that drove the French aristocracy. Catherine was born in 1640 to a poor family, but from a young age she exhibited a talent for survival. Her early life was marked by hardship, and she quickly learned that in order to rise above her circumstances, she would need to harness the power of the forbidden. Catherine became a student of the occult, mastering the art of potion making and divination. By the time she was an adult, she had become one of the most sought-after figures in the underworld of Paris. Catherine's clientele included the most powerful members of French society, nobles, courtiers, and even members of the royal family. They came to her seeking solutions to their most pressing problems: a rival to be eliminated, a lover to be seduced, or a fortune to be secured. Catherine offered them all of this and more, operating from her secluded home in Villeneuve, a quiet area on the outskirts of Paris. But Catherine's services were not limited to potions and poisons. She was also the high priestess of a secretive cult that combined elements of Christianity and the occult. Her black masses were infamous, rituals in which the sacred and the profane were mingled in a grotesque display of power. During these ceremonies, Catherine would invoke dark forces, offering sacrifices to secure the desired outcomes for her clients. One of the most shocking aspects of Catherine's story is the extent to which she was involved in the lives of the French nobility. She was not merely a servant to the powerful, she was their confidant, their ally, and in many cases their co-conspirator. Her influence extended to the highest levels of the French court, and it was during this time that she crossed paths with Françoise Athénaïs de Rouchard de Mortemart, the Marquise de Montespan. Françoise was a woman who understood power better than most. As one of the most beautiful and intelligent women at the court of Louis XIV, Françoise quickly rose to become the king's favorite mistress. But in the world of Versailles, where every smile concealed a dagger, even the most powerful were vulnerable. Françoise knew that her position was precarious, and when she feared losing the king's affections, she turned to Catherine for help. François' relationship with Louis XIV was not just a romantic liaison, it was a carefully crafted alliance that brought her immense influence. She bore the king several children who were legitimized and integrated into the royal lineage. But Françoise was acutely aware that in the ever-shifting dynamics of court life, her position could be usurped at any moment. Desperate to maintain her hold over the king, she sought Catherine's magic. According to later testimony, Françoise became a regular client of Catherine, purchasing love powders and participating in black masses designed to ensure the king's undying devotion. These rituals were not mere theatrics. They were elaborate ceremonies, including the sacrifice of newborn infants, whose blood was used in dark invocations meant to bind the king to Françoise. One of the most chilling accounts come from Marie Voisin, Catherine's daughter, who testified that Françoise participated in these rites with full knowledge of their implications. During one such ritual, Françoise lay naked on an altar as prayers were offered to secure the king's love. A cloth was placed over her belly and a cross and other implements were placed on the cloth, along with a note describing her desire. Father Guibourg, who performed these masses, performed a standard mass except that when he elevated the host, he read aloud the note along with an invocation to the demons. He then cuts the throat of a newborn baby, pours its blood into the chalice and cuts out its heart, which was placed in a vase with the consecrated host. He completed the ritual by having intercourse with Françoise. Needless to say, an amatory mass was not only deeply sacrilegious, it was also profoundly illegal. Catherine was said to procure the babies from prostitutes. She reportedly disposed of the corpses of the babies by burning them in an oven and then burying them in her garden. Several witnesses claimed that she had bragged about disposing of 2,500 infants that way. This scene was one of utter depravity, a stark contrast to the image of grace and beauty that Françoise projected at court. But the darkest aspect of François' involvement with Catherine was the accusation that she had conspired to poison the king himself. The testimony of Catherine and her associates suggested that Françoise, fearing that the king's affections were waning, had sought to remove him from the equation entirely. While these allegations were never conclusively proven, they were enough to cast a long shadow over François' life. Despite the gravity of these accusations, Françoise managed to escape the public disgrace that befell others. The Chambre Ardente, the tribunal established to investigate the affair of the poisons, was careful to shield her from the full brunt of the scandal. However, the damage to her reputation was done. Françoise gradually fell out of favor with the king, and by 1691 she had withdrawn from court life entirely, retiring to a convent where she spent the rest of her days in penance and prayer. She died in 1707, a woman whose name had once been synonymous with beauty and power, now forever linked to the dark arts and the greatest scandal of Louis XIV's reign. The affair of the poisons was a scandal of such magnitude that it threatened to destabilize the entire French court. Louis XIV, ever conscious of the need to maintain his absolute authority, responded swiftly and decisively. In 1679, he established the Chambre Ardente, a special tribunal tasked with investigating and prosecuting those involved in the scandal. The Chambre Ardente operated under a veil of secrecy, its proceeding held in the basement of the arsenal, where the dim light of torches created an atmosphere of dread and foreboding. The Chambre Ardente was not just a court, it was an instrument of royal power designed to root out the prisoners and their accomplices with ruthless efficiency. Over the course of 3 years, the tribunal issued 319 subpoenas, arrested 194 individuals, and sent 36 to their deaths. The court's method methods were harsh, with suspects often subjugated to brutal torture to extract confessions. The most notorious of these was the water torture that we spoke about earlier in this episode, which was used on Marie. The investigations conducted by the Chambre Ardente uncovered a vast network of poisoners, witches, and their clients, revealing the extent to which the French nobility had embraced the dark arts. The court found evidence of black masses, sacrilegious sites, and the use of deadly poisons to settle scores and eliminate rivals. The revelations were shocking, not just for the crimes themselves, but for the fact that they implicated some of the most powerful individuals in France. But the Chambre Ardente was also a political tool, and its work was carefully managed by the king himself, who was determined to root out the poisoners, but he was also acutely aware of the potential damage to his court's reputation. As a result, the tribunal investigations were selective, with certain names carefully protected from the public exposure. The court's work was thorough, but it was also constrained by the need to maintain the appearance of order and stability in the French court. By 1682, the Chambre Ardente had completed its work, and the tribunal was dissolved. The affair of the poisons, while not fully resolved, had been contained, and the remaining cases were quietly dropped. The scandal had exposed the fragility of the court's glittering facade, revealing the desperation, fear, and ambition that lurked beneath the surface. It was a moment of reckoning for the French aristocracy, a reminder that even in a world of power and privilege, the darkness of the human soul could never be controlled. The affair of the poisons left a legacy of darkness that would haunt the French court for generations. It was a scandal that revealed the lengths to which individuals would go to secure power, love, and control, even if it meant consorting with witches, committing murder, and invoking the darkest forces of the occult. The stories of Marie, Catherine, and Francoise are not just tales of crime, they are reflections of a society where the pursuit of power had become an all-consuming obsession. For Marie, the quest for control led to her downfall. Her desire to seize her family's fortune drove her to commit murder, and her actions ultimately led to her execution. She was a woman who had everything but wanted more, and in the end, her ambition consumed her. For Catherine, her empire of darkness was built on the fears and desires of the powerful. She was a woman who understood the true nature of power and used it to manipulate those around her. But in the end, the darkness she wielded turned against her, leading to her execution in the flames she had so often invoked. And for Francoise, the pursuit of love and power led her down a path of destruction. She was a woman who had captivated a king, but her fear of losing his affection drove her to seek out the forbidden. Her name, once synonymous with beauty and grace, became forever linked to the darkest scandal of Louis XIV's reign. The affair of the poisons is a story of how the desires for power, love, and control can lead even the most privileged down a path of destruction. It is a tale of sorcery and murder, where the quest for dominance unleashed forces that no one, not even the mighty Sun King, could fully control. In the end, the affair of the poison was not just about the crimes committed, it was about the darkness within the human heart. A darkness that once unleashed could not be easily contained. The scandal stands as a stark reminder of the perils of unchecked ambition and the dangers that lie in the shadows of power. Well guys, this is the end of our episode for today. If you've liked the stories of Marie, Catherine, and Francoise, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and tell me what you thought about the episode in the comments. This has been What is History. Thanks for listening.